Alright, so this video is kind of more of a ramble thing rather than like an actual kind of discussion thing, because I've been trying to think about my thoughts on this for a bit now, and I'm still like on the fence with the whole decision, but it's about the connections, so let's get into it. So for anyone who doesn't know, through modern Resident Evil games, so Resident Evil 7 pretty much onwards, a faction or a group was introduced called the Connections, and it was very kind of subtle in the main game of Resident Evil 7 till the very end, where you find out that Mia Winters was working with them, and essentially this group is like an underground black market weapons dealer for bioweapons, so viruses and stuff like that, basically. And what was interesting was it was suggested that through files and stuff that the overall kind of leader of this group was Brandon Bailey, who goes all the way back to Umbrella, which is very interesting as well. And while they weren't being set up to be this big bad, they were definitely kind of set up to be this enemy you would deal with at some point. Now with Village, it kind of went under the radar completely. There was not really any mention of it massively in the game. I think there was also maybe some file stuff that was very brief that talked about Brandon Bailey. But with Requiem, they're kind of slightly now at the forefront, but they've been changed in such a drastic kind of way that it's interesting for like the whole like overall story of Resident Evil, basically. Now I'm not going to get too crazy into it because obviously huge spoilers for pretty much most of the franchise at this point, but I'll try and sum it up in as best the way I can, in a way that makes hopefully some kind of sense. Okay, so a lot of the information you're going to know about the connections in Requiem is presented to you through Arc, so the final act of the game. In there you'll find kind of files that say that there's bioweapons for sale. So there's one for the new type of dogs you fight in Requiem, which does literally straight up say it's an improved version of Umbrella's Cerberus, which is obviously the original kind of Resident Evil dogs you deal with. So there's that one. You've got the Lickers, the Tyrant, Mr. X, the Plant, and the Nemesis Parasite. So not Nemesis, which was, when I read it I was like holy shit, but no. The Nemesis Parasite, which is something that is altered slightly from the original Resident Evil 3 in the remake, so you know what I'm talking about if you kind of have played that game before. So in terms of outright presence in Requiem, there is more. Zeno is in the connections, and obviously it's interesting because he's a clone of Wesker, or at least it's suggested he's a clone of Wesker. There's a few questions around Zeno. Why is the markings that Leon has on his body if he's a clone of Wesker? So it does kind of leave things open a lot for Zeno. I've made a video about Zeno already, in terms of him being a decent villain or not, and I'm kind of 50-50 on his character. It kind of feels like he's just there for the most part, for fan service. Because like I said in the video, you could literally replace Zeno with anybody else that was part of their connections, and the story would play out the same. It's just you've got some guy that looks like Wesker instead. So that's my whole thing with that. But anyway, back to the connections. So basically, in a simple, brief kind of way, they've set the connections up which suggests that they're the ones kind of on top of everything that's happened in Resident Evil as a whole. So they controlled Umbrella, they controlled the government, they controlled like Tricell. They had their hand in everywhere, and I still don't know if that's like a good thing or not. At the end of the day, with the original games and 1 through 3, where Umbrella was still present, you're still dealing with them head on. They're still a bad company, but it is run. They're controlled by a worse company, so it doesn't really affect the games like on the front, but in the background, obviously now you know that they're being controlled, and the whole reason Umbrella went under was because of the connections. It's been tied into the lore in such a way that's so much bigger than I thought it would have been. Like my theory was before Requiem, they set it up, and they set it up again, and then finally you kind of go after like Brandon Bailey or something like that. But now, on top of them being like controlled, them being in control, of everything, it is suggested through the kind of Grace report, if you read that in the menu, that Brandon's not even the leader of it, and it's he's a small part of something that's much bigger. Like it literally says that the connections seem to have been around since like the 80s, which is way before Raccoon City even happened anyway. So they've been around for a long ass time, and I don't know. And there's so much more. The Requiem on the surface tells you about like the company, the collection specifically, that changes like a lot of the lore. So just off the rip, just as an example, so you're now telling me that instead of Spencer being killed because of Wesker being like this power hungry, evil dude who killed him, you're now saying that the connections had him killed. So did they tell Wesker to kill him? Like obviously because they're controlling Umbrella, so are they controlling Wesker? Are they telling him to kill Spencer? And even files in Requiem suggest that Spencer died peacefully in his estate, and if that was peacefully, I don't think getting stabbed through the chest by a hand is very peaceful. But then again, cover-ups, so connections covering it up. They didn't have him killed, he died of old age. Like, there's so much going on now with that group that is going to change a lot over the course of the next few games, as well as maybe potential remakes. I think purely because Spencer's in 5, and you see him die in 5, that game surely is getting a remake now, because they've got to kind of explain that in a way that makes sense to us themselves with 9. And again, like I just said, they could literally just say, through the connections, Wesker was asked to kill him. And that's it. There you go. And it was covered up, and obviously all the kind of news reportings of Spencer say he died peacefully. Like that was it, of old age, even though he didn't. But there's so much to pick at now with the whole lore, with the connections. I'm open to it. I'm open to it, and as long as it makes sense in the end, it's fine. And like I said, if you take the game as its own thing, like 1 through 3 at least, you're still dealing with Umbrella. So, them being in control of Umbrella doesn't really make a difference. You're still dealing with a bad company, they just have a worse one to control, like I said. Yeah, but it's something I've been kind of thinking about since I finished the game, and I'm like, this has to be done in a way that makes sense. It has to be done in a way where you can explain it, and it fits in with, every entry's lore, and it makes sense. Like that's the trick. It's not difficult, like I said, they're not present in the games, so them being like this hierarchy, it's kind of moot. Maybe they'll add files or clues to it in any future remakes like Code Veronica 0, 5, if that happens. Probably, right? But it's just something that's been stuck in my mind for ages, and I'm simultaneously like, oh my god, but then simultaneously like, holy shit, this is cool. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to ramble about it for a little bit, because it's a huge thing that not loads of people are talking about with Requiem. And I've been interested in the connection storyline since it kind of got set up. So I'm intrigued to see the direction it's going in now. But I'm also nervous because it could mean that there's so many more changes coming to the overall series. And Requiem does a lot already. Like, it does a lot to change past events or characters and stuff. So we'll have to see what happens in the future. But that's pretty much all I wanted to say. So leave your thoughts down below about the connections. Do you like the setup that they've been given? Do you kind of like the fact that they're kind of the big bad overall now? Give me your thoughts on what you think they could do with them. But yeah, thank you all for watching, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one.